This is Laren. Happy Sunday. I'm going to be going over some content creation, and this will be something that will kind of coincide with the content I've been making over the last month or so. I've been practicing using both Chat GPT and the Midjourney. I have the paid versions of each, but you could get to a point where you can make some pretty good content even with the free stuff. And what I'm in the middle of right now is inputting the content into Fantasy Grounds. So I thought I would stop what I was doing and share the process with you. And I've done this on several other videos. So if you want to know more, I also have other videos that are similar. So what I've done is I've created a theme through Chat GPT, and I've created some artwork to kind of go along with it. And then I inputted this through the DnD5e import tool in Fantasy Grounds so that it's easier to input it. And what I have here is a Nightmare Steed. I have Zephyr the Fallen, who's an anti-paladin. And then I'm making his crew of goblins that are essentially part of his little team. He's got 3 goblin associates. One of them is like an assassin rogue. The other one is basically like his squire apprentice, like a little fighter, and then the other is a spellcaster. I haven't decided if I want it to be a wizard or warlock or sorcerer or something like that, but nonetheless, I came up with some pretty cool art, kind of luckily, accidentally / practice. So if you're not getting these kind of results, it took me about 3 or 4 months to kind of practice to learn the limits of the AI tools. And also I had some paid versions, so that helps too. So this is the final outcome. I'm using Canva here to put everything together. Canva is just a program. It is paid. They do have a demo, kind of a short demo period, like a month or something, or a week, and then you have to pay for it. But essentially, I've taken these art pieces here and kind of layered them together and made a collage of the images that I created in Midjourney. And what's nice is the prompts that I used were kind of identical. And even though these were all supposed to be one goblin, I got the idea of just using them as different goblins in the crew so that I can have a little bit more variety, not just one apprentice or one squire. So we have an assassin here. We have Grimble, the squire. And then we have like a spellcaster. I don't know if he's going to be a mage or wizard or whatever, but he's a goblin. All of them are goblins. And then we have this Nightmare Steed, which I haven't given it a name yet. And then of course we have Zephyr the Fallen, who's the anti-paladin. So we have this kind of like this motley crew that I'm putting together that's been pretty interesting and fun to do. And this is for home personal use, so I'm not using this in a commercial product. So anyone who gets upset about using AI, you don't panic. It's just using this for my own homebrew stuff. And all I've done is take these images and layer them into the Canva tool and kind of made like a collage. And then I've exported it. I'm going to bring it into Fantasy Grounds through the interface. So if you go to Fantasy Grounds, if you're kind of new to Fantasy Grounds and you're not sure how to import images, you have an images area under the campaign settings. So I'm going to bring my pointer up since I'm going to do a little instruction. I don't want to confuse you or, you won't be able to see where I'm pointing. Okay, so essentially I'm going to come over here on the right-hand side, go to campaign under images. Right now I don't have anything. So I'm going to drop down this group and I'm going to click on this add category. So I'm going to make my own art group. And I do this whether I have content loaded or not. I just have the SRD loaded right now for the DnD5e rule set. So I'm just going to put anti-paladin crew or something like that. I don't really have any use for it right now. But if I did, I'm going to have all the assets, everything ready to go. I can load it as a module later. So what I'm going to do is anti-paladin crew. And that's just going to be the title of the category or the group that I made. And then I'm going to add some assets from this library area under assets. So I don't have any of this stuff loaded in yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on images in here in assets. and that's within this particular session or this particular campaign. I'm going to click on folder on the bottom, open that up, and I have a blank folder here. So what I'm going to do is take the images that I generated from Chat GPT, and I'm going to import all these just so I have some really cool handouts. So I'm going to hit Control Copy, and what I've done is I've named these, except for these two guys. I haven't quite given them a name yet, but I'm going to figure something out. So I'll just hit Copy, and then go back in here, and I'm going to actually paste this into the folder. So before I go any further, I'm going to at least give these a title. So I'll say goblin underscore, because you don't necessarily have to have a formal name. So I'll say assassin. And then the other one is going to be a goblin spellcaster. So this underscore spellcaster. That way you're not kind of cornered into any specific thing. And then the other ones have a specific name, like Zephyr. Nightmare Steed is kind of generic. Grimble, you can always rename that, but you want to make sure that you name all of your art assets before you import them, because it makes it so much easier to identify what they are. So what I'm going to do is put the word handout in front of it. And what that does is it will help sort out what the asset is in Fantasy Grounds. Now I'll put a underscore. I don't think a comma works very well. I don't remember. Let me try. I don't know if you can use a comma. I forget. Yeah, it'll let it. So that's what I'm going to do for each one of these is, since these are going to be handouts, these aren't actually anything but that. They're not tokens yet or anything. But I'm going to put handout in there with a comma. And when I import those into Fantasy Grounds, it will have a better looking layout, and it will organize itself in the tree view for the files in Fantasy Grounds. So handout, comma, and then whatever the name is. Take the time to do this. If you're on a big project, I mean, if it's one thing, who cares, right? But if you're doing a large project or you're trying to organize your images, before you link it to anything and before you actually do anything with it, take the time to rename your files. It really helps, especially if you're someone that's kind of new to Fantasy Grounds, or if you're one of those people that are trying to source animated images and such. You really want to name these things so you know what the heck they are. So these are just handouts that I might show during a session. And now that I have them all named accordingly, now I'm going to close the asset window temporarily for images. I'm going to click refresh. So I clicked on images, I clicked on folder, and now that I've put the images in there that I want, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. And it's going to create a folder called campaign. Now these are only handouts. If I click on this, these are going to be available in Fantasy Grounds for me to show to my table or to my players. But what I want to do here now is import these into the campaign record. So if you look at this bottom import, you can do that from here. You can create from campaign assets, which will pull everything at once. So you can do them individually from this arrow import down below, which is also how you import other file types like the WebP, WebM files, PNGs, JPEG, Dungeon Fog, Dungeon Draft, Universal Virtual Tabletops. There's different formats, but in this case, I'm going to use the built-in tools since I have pretty much most of what I want here. I'm going to go ahead and click on Create from Campaign Assets, which is like a shortcut instead of doing one at a time. So you click on this, it's going to say, you sure you want to do that? You say yes, and this would be something you do at the very end anyways. But go ahead and do that, and that's how this pans out. So right here, I'm going to delete this temporarily because I misspelled it. And I'm going to go back into the folder. I'm going to fix this and actually take the extra O out of there. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And then I'll just individually drag that one piece. So let's see, this was Goblin Assassin. I already have that. Goblin Spellcaster. I already have that. There's Grim, or there's Grimble. there is is it the horse? Nope, it's got to be Zephyr. So I'll drag Zephyr in here, and then that'll put it back in there. However, if you do this after the fact, after you have all these linked to everything, you have to go back and fix those too. So don't make that mistake as well. So if you change file names and you change structure or even where you locate these, and if you already have them structured to other things like linked to maps or stories or whatever, you have to go back and fix those links. So you have to redrag them. Otherwise, it's going to look at it and not know what this asset is because I changed the name of it. And that's a no-no. So don't rename all your stuff after the fact. Try to do it ahead of time, because if you have this linked to anything, it's going to break that link. So when you call that thing up, whatever, maybe it's a story entry, and you have a link to the image, when you click on that image, it might not pull this image up. It might just give you a blank screen or a question mark. So don't do that, or don't fall into that trap. So the next thing is going to start making tokens for these guys. So I have a page bookmarked. This is not a new website. This is something that the community uses quite a bit. But again, I really like how this picture turned out. It's so cool. I'm really happy with it. But anyways, I'm going to go to the token stamp, and I'm going to make a couple different tokens. So one is going to be a portrait picture in case I want to make characters, like player characters, out of these guys. And then the next is going to be tokens. So I'm going to start with the tokens first. So I'm going to open up my assets folder where I have these things stored at. And I'm going to drag each one to this page and make a token. So first I'm going to make one for the Nightmare Steed. So drag and drop him on here, and right up here is a preview window. So stretch this out to get closer to the face of this horse. That might be a little too big, so I'll kind of narrow it down a little bit more. There we go. So I just kind of want the head feature. And then if I want this to be a token, I kind of want it to be a pog instead of a square, because that's more for like a portrait. So this is going to be this. And I'm going to reposition the horse thing, and it looks like it's a little bit too big still. So there's our preview window. And then the border around here, I'm going to kind of make it a reddish color instead of that beige. I don't mind the beige, it's just that I kind of want it more kind of diabolical or fiendish. So I'm going to click on this red up here, and then come back in here and kind of play with this. So it's kind of got this kind of metallic red look to it. That's kind of what I was looking for. So this is the first token. So I'm just going to download it for now. And I'm going to go on to the next image. So I'm going to replace this image with the next token that I want to make. So this is Grimble the Squire. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to leave the token ring the same because they're kind of like on the same crew or the same team. So when I use these tokens, they're going to be kind of themed for the encounters or whatever I want to do with it. So this is the goblin. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. So I like to see the face, but I don't want to see just the face, but there we go. So that's not too bad. So this is Grimble. He's like a warrior goblin kind of type, and he's a squire to Zephyr the Fallen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit download. I didn't make that name up, actually the Chat GPT did, and I'll show you how that works shortly. So I'm going to hit download and then go to the next item. So next item up is going to be the assassin. So here is the assassin that is working for Zephyr, or he's kind of allies with him. And I'm going to do the same thing, just download this one. Oops, I didn't want to do that. So just download, there we go. And now the next one is going to be Zephyr himself. So let's put him in here. And again, I'm going to expand this a little so we can see his big metallic head here. And that should be close enough. I'm going to hit download on that. And I think I need one more. So let me look. What am I missing here? Okay, here we go. Here's the mage. So, or the spellcaster. I keep calling him a mage, so I just might make him a mage. I don't know. or a spellcaster of some sort, probably a sorcerer or a wizard, or I don't know if I want him to be a priest, because the paladin kind of already has kind of priest type abilities, so I kind of want something a little bit more flexible, a little bit different, so they have a good power base. Okay, so there we go. There's the wizard. I'm gonna go ahead and hit download. Okay, so now I have all of those tokens created. Now I'm going to go into my downloads folder and sort them out. So I have a folder already started for this particular project. So I'm going to go to my downloads and go to those token things and grab all the token files. And I'm going to copy and paste these, or cut and paste actually. So I go ahead and hit cut and go to the folder that's was created for this job. So here's the anti-paladin art PNG package here, and I'm going to paste it in here. So it's important to organize this stuff. It makes it so much easier. You just take that extra minute and move your files and rename them, because it can be really crazy. So instead of giving these specific names, I'm just going to give them kind of like a generic title. So I'm just going to say goblin underscore spellcaster, because we don't really have anything assigned yet. Oops. Let's see. We want goblin underscore spellcaster. Is that going to work? Yep. And then we're going to do the nightmare steed. And doing this ahead of time is going to save you a ton of headache and work. So let me see. And what we're going to do with these is, once I have all these renamed, we're going to put them in Fantasy Grounds so that we can use them for our NPCs that I built. So nightmare underscore steed. Yep. And then this is the squire, so we'll just say goblin fighter, I guess. Goblin, we'll just say warrior, since we don't really know what he is. And then that's that. And then this is the assassin, so goblin assassin. So these are just kind of generic token names. That way there's a little bit more usability beyond what I'm doing here. So if I want to use them in a different game, they don't have an exact name, and they'll be useful for other things. And then here's our anti-paladin, so that's what I'm just going to call it, anti-paladin, instead of his actual name, even though he has a personality and a background and everything. And he's human. Okay, so his real name is Zephyr, but we'll leave it at that. Okay, so I have all the tokens now. So what I'm going to do is highlight each one of these and right-click and go to copy. And then I'm going to go into Fantasy Grounds. And now this time I'm going to go to the tokens thing. I'm still in the asset window, so I'll go to tokens. And I have a token folder that's in the data, which is kind of shared amongst everything. So I'm going to click on that, because I don't want to put it necessarily just in this campaign. I want to have it for all my games in case I want to use it somewhere else. So I click on custom. This is where I put all my custom tokens. And then I'm going to click on folder. And it should actually, no, it's going to the campaign. I'll just use this. But normally I would put it in all of those folders. I would put it in a universal folder instead of a individual. But I'll go ahead and just be lazy now. I'll just put this in the tokens folder for this particular campaign. So I'll go ahead and click this down and basically go back to this area here, hit the refresh button. It makes a folder, a campaign folder for the tokens now. Now these aren't going to be added as assets for viewing, but they're going to be for these NPCs. So right now I have this letter token. So I'm unlocked Grimble, the Goblin Squire, and I'm taking his token here that I made for him and drag and drop that to replace the letter G. And then the Nightmare Steed, same thing. So I'm going to grab the horse token that we made, or the nightmare, and then also Zephyr, the fallen. So I'll take that and grab this and drop it onto his NPC record. So then what you can do at this point is this other tab here where the information for the NPC is, I can take this, unlock it, and then what I'll do is I'll say this is a photo or a picture or whatever. I'll drag and drop the encounter images, or in this case, this would be campaign image. So the handout, anti-paladin, Zephyr here. So drag this over. And then I can rename it. So I'll get rid of the word handout and I'll say Zephyr the Fallen. That way it looks better. And then I'm going to bold the image thing. And then this is something that you can share with your players. So when you're in the middle of a game and you're using this NPC, you pop the image up and it's ready to go. You can share it. This is handout Zephyr, but what I might do over here is unidentify it and just put, I'll just say, I won't say anti-paladin, I'll just say evil knight. Something like that, so that they don't know exactly what it is. And then I'll go ahead and lock it. So this is so that when you share the image, they'll see this thing says evil knight, but they don't know his name is Zephyr necessarily, and they don't necessarily know he's an anti-paladin, they just know he ain't good. So this is a evil knight is what I called it, just so it has a different title. So when you share this image initially, they don't know what it is until they fight it or they discover, through roleplay. So that is just kind of one way you can kind of embellish these things and make them a lot more interesting. So this process here takes a while, but what I suggest you do is build all the NPCs, then get all the artwork ready, make all the tokens, and then at the end kind of link everything together like I'm doing now. And that's probably your best process for Fantasy Grounds, especially if you're making homebrew content or if you're doing a big conversion. You don't want to be jumping all over the place. It's going to take too long to do the work. So that's kind of why I'm sharing this with you guys, because I don't want you to go through the same struggles that I'm going through with this sort of thing. So it just depends on what your needs are and what your focus is. But essentially, this is how I created the content through the Midjourney app in Discord. So I have my own Discord channel with Midjourney, and I just gave it some prompts. So that's how I was able to generate this image, which turned out pretty good. So that's almost like a poster image. It's really nice. Okay, so there's that. So I'm going to go to the Chat GPT. Now, in this thing, I've shared this already online in other videos, but I have like a basic prompt to use for Chat GPT. This is the tool that I use, or basically this is the actual template that I'm using. And this is what generated Zephyr the Fallen, and he has the mounted feet for his nightmare steed. And then that was corrected, and then I have the nightmare steed itself, and then Grimble the goblin. So what I'm going to do is ask it to create another stat block based on that template. So I'm going to say create a DnD5e NPC stat block. And what I found is if you ask it the same question over and over, it confuses it less. So even though I could just say make a paladin or whatever, but if I do that, it might start derailing itself from the conversation. So I'm trying to keep it focused. So create a D&D NPC stat block for a for a goblin spellcaster, and I'm going to let it decide what kind of spellcaster it's going to be. So I don't want to necessarily say mage or wizard or anything. So NPC stat block for a goblin spellcaster at a CR2 challenge rating. He is armed with a quarterstaff and throwing daggers. So that's what his MO is. And that's about all I need to add there. If I do too much, it can confuse it as well. Oh, and also add in a brief themed background like the previous conversation. So I kind of wanted to go back and look at what I've already got. All right, let's see if it works. So I'll go ahead and hit this, and it looks like the spelling's not too bad. And I'll go ahead and click that, see what happens. So Nash, the Goblin Spellcaster, he's got Nimble Escape, could speak Goblin and Common. He's got an intelligence of 16, which is decent. Oh, he's 4th level spellcaster. His ability is intelligence, so more than likely he's some sort of wizard. Yeah, he has the following wizard spells. So this is basically the stat block. Now all I have to do is copy and paste this, and most of this should be in the correct format because I've given it a really good, clean, organized template, and that really helps this. So if you go back into Fantasy Grounds, and if you're familiar with the DnD5e rule set and how NPCs can be a challenge to make, this makes it so much easier. So this is the import NPC, these little lines here. So I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor. If you right click, you can go to clean up text, and it will show you kind of what it will look like before it parses into Fantasy Grounds. So far this looks pretty good. And then at the bottom is the background. So I need to copy and paste this over to the right hand side because this particular thing doesn't belong in that particular area because it will throw off the parsing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit delete on that. And what we have here, it even has a spell. So he has Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, Ray of Frost, Magic Missile, Witch Bolt, Misty Step, Scorching Ray. It's pretty cool. So that's a pretty decent CR2 level wizard. So it's not bad. He's like a 3rd level spellcaster, sort of. So let's hit import, and let's see what it looks like. So this is the end result. This looks pretty good so far. Looks like everything parsed correctly. And when you lock the sheet, you can kind of mouse over and see if this parses correctly, which I think it does. It looks good. And then on the back is where we had that background. So it says Nash was always different from the other goblins in his tribe. While they were content with their brutish ways, Nash had a thirst for knowledge and power. He found an old spell book in the ruins of a wizard's tower and taught himself how to harness the arcane arts. Now Nash is a formidable spellcaster using his magic to dominate his tribe and strike fear into the heart of his enemies. Despite his power, Nash is always seeking more, driven by desire to prove that he is more than just a goblin. So that's a really cool background. I didn't make that up. That was all done with the Chat GPT AI. So now if you wanted to, you would unlock this kind of like what we were doing earlier, and we'll link the NPC token. So if I go to my assets again and go to tokens under my campaign, this is the spellcaster, and I'll drag and drop that up here. And then for the campaign image that I had made earlier, I'm going to link the images, and this is the spellcaster. Link that here. I'm going to take out the word handout, doesn't need to be in there. Make this bold, and then I'll check the link while I'm here, make sure it's bringing up the correct thing, and it is. So there we go. So this is how the process goes for making NPCs, but you don't want to do like that method every time unless you only got like 1 or 2 to do. You want to do all the tokens, all the background images, all the text, do all of it in one fell swoop if you can, because that'll really save you some time. So I wouldn't do this way unless, for this example, for doing this on a stream, I'm doing it this way. But if I was going to do a big project, I would have everything already done in each group and then link everything together at the end. So I'm going to make one more NPC. So I'm going to say create a DnD5e stat block. Now I kind of had to engineer what the stat block is supposed to look like for Fantasy Grounds. So if you don't put in the right format, it's going to give you garbage, and then it's going to just piss you off because it's not going to parse correctly. So you'll get used to that. and what to look for and what not to do and all that stuff. So for a goblin assassin rogue, he is armed with a damaging poison. I'll say daggers, hand crossbow, and a short sword. And then he is wearing leather armor. This is really all I have to do to make this happen. So, but the main thing here is to have that template correct, because that's what generates this. And if it isn't correct, it'll just add whatever it feels like. And then when you go to copy and paste this into Fantasy Grounds, it's not going to be right. It's going to be kind of okay, but there'll be a lot of stuff out of place, and it'll just piss you off. So find a good template or an example of text that you want to use, and use that as your kind of like your your template, your go-to, and you save it somewhere in a Word file or Notepad++, or even in Discord, just so you have it, so you don't constantly fight it. Okay, so this guy looks kind of high level. Let's see what he is. He's a CR what? Ooh, CR3. Nice. All right, so he's that looks really neat. So he's got background. He's got assassinate. They didn't put the poison in, but that's okay. I can handle that. So if that's the case, I can say, please add the poison damage trait for applying the extra poison damage, and also include a Constitution saving throw, because I don't like potions that just damage. You don't have any save, so I'm going to go ahead and allow for that. So Constitution. Constitution, okay. Saving throw. So I'm asking it to add, and then we'll see say throw for the NPC stat block above. Please rewrite it. I'm gonna be lazy and just have it rewrite the whole thing. Okay, so it's gonna look at that and go, oh, okay. So it's coming up with the same thing. It hasn't changed anything yet, thank God, because sometimes it will. It's kind of weird. It'll just add something else that you didn't ask for, or it'll change things around. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't ask for all those changes. Okay, so yeah, here's the poison damage. Yep. So this will parse in Fantasy Grounds. So when you need to use that, you can drag that, drop that onto your characters or your people he's fighting, and it will roll. Give him a saving throw first, and then you roll the damage, and they'll take half for that. Okay, so this is Slink. He's a goblin who's honed his skills in the shadows. He's an assassin, a silent killer. I like it. So I'm going to copy this data again and go to Fantasy Grounds, and I'm in the NPCs area, which is in the campaign section, and go ahead and import text. And this is what the format looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and close this or reopen it. So I'm trying to clear it. Hit Control V, and then like I said, I'm gonna copy and paste this data over here. And then I'll right click and clean up this text. I'll go ahead and delete this extra stuff because I don't want it in two places, and it will cause problems with parsing. Then if you right click, you can kind of see what it looks like cleaned up with all the extra spaces removed out of there, because that's another problem with parsing. If you got too many spaces in there, it'll throw it off too. So here's the actions, the weapons, and this are the traits, which is nimble, escape, assassinate, sneak attack, and the poison damage. So go ahead and hit import, and it looks decent. Yep, everything looks like it's correctly parsed. So that's what happens, or what you're able to do once you understand how the wording and how it's supposed to be arranged. Because one little extra comma or one little extra period will throw off the whole frickin' thing. So just keep that in mind. He doesn't, let's see, is he resistant to poison? No, I don't want to do that. That's too powerful. I was thinking about making him resistant to poison, but maybe his own poison, but not every single poison out there. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, so then once we have that, I can go ahead and close this. And then again, I'm going to assign the NPC images and such. So I'm going to go to my assets. This is where my tokens are. I'm in the tokens area. Go to campaign, and I'm going to drag the assassin token up here. And then I'm going to close, or actually I'm going to go to, yeah, I'll close that. And now I'm going to go to the other tab, and this is where I'm going to add the actual image. So let's see what this looks like. So bring the images up, and here is the assassin link, and then I'm going to go ahead and delete the word handout because I don't need that for this. And then I'm going to highlight image and hit Control B, so that's going to make that bold. And I can even take out this underscore. It's not necessary here. And now I want to click on it, make sure the link works, because I don't know how many times I've walked off and forgot that, and then I realized I didn't link the right thing, or I had renamed something and I didn't go back and fix it. So this is how you check that. So check the links, click on them, make sure they go to the right places. And this is basically the assassin handout, which I really like, turned out pretty good. And then I'll go ahead and close that and lock that up. So this is kind of a quick way to make goblins and, you know, NPCs. It makes it a little bit quicker, a little less painful. Still takes a lot of work, like, because I'm doing them from scratch. So if you have an example already in Fantasy Grounds, all you have to do is make a copy, edit it, and then move on. You don't have to do all this extra stuff. But in this case, these are all unique characters or NPCs. So I hit B on that, format that to a bold, and then we got all this stuff here. So it looks pretty good. They look pretty professional. So I must say I'm pretty happy and impressed on how these turned out. And then the handout looks really good. So if we expand this in Fantasy Grounds, we can use this kind of to introduce the posse here to the people that are on the table. So this is the image. If you right click, you can actually expand it, have it zoomed to fit. And then if you want to get really fancy, you can go to the effects, add an effects layer. And then I'm going to assign it to mist. And that'll make that. But I don't want it going across this whole screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the mask. And I'm only going to apply it to this area because I don't want it all over the whole screen. And then I'm going to turn down the amount a little bit and slow the speed down so it's not going super fast. And then I'll go ahead and turn it down so it's not obnoxious. So that kind of adds that kind of mystery to it. And then I'm going to blur it a little bit. And that way it's kind of more subtle and not so strong or so crazy. And then you can always turn it off. So if you don't want that mist on there, you know, you can turn that off so that your players can just see that first. I already added a little bit of mist down here, a static, you know, kind of a filtered mist down here. And you can't really tell, but behind this knight, I put like a black shadow behind him, and then I kind of faded it out so it's not so bright, but it kind of gives that, kind of makes them stand out a little bit from the horse because they were kind of blending in too much. So I put this big black cloud behind them, and I turned down the opacity quite a bit so it wouldn't overtake this. But there is a small, slight shadow behind here to kind of give it a little bit of contrast, because the armor and the barding armor from the horse is kind of matching in. So that's what I did. So there you go. And then your last test would be, if you're going to do this, especially on a professional level or for your game, you want to put your NPCs on the combat tracker. You want to make sure they're working. So I'm going to put them all on there and kind of go through them to test them out, because this is what you want to do before a game, a couple hours before the game, not 10 minutes before. But the Nightmare Steed, and what I usually do for games and for checking stuff is I'll take each one of these NPCs and I'll just lay them out here in this kind of a deck of cards kind of thing. And that way, when I click on the link for them, they come right up to the top. I don't have to have them spread out all the way across the screen, which wastes space. So this is kind of how I do the characters too. If I had player characters on here, then I would layer those on here too. So this is a good way to kind of to mitigate having 50,000 tokens and all that stuff. So you want to, or I mean NPCs. So if you want to kind of make this a little easier. So now what I do is I'll go to the offense, which is the sword, and then I'll take a look at his special stuff that he has here. One thing I notice is that his spell casting doesn't look right. It's here, but none of the spells are actually parsed. So there must be something wrong with how this is set up. Because normally, I mean, it states it here, it looks right, but something is not quite right. So it could be that it's, oh, I see what happened. This should be a trait, not an action. So this is the kind of stuff you have to watch for. So what I'm going to do is create another trait. It's blank right now. I'm going to call it spell casting. Okay, because that's what triggers it. Then I'm going to hit Control A and Control Copy, then Control V to paste it. And now I'm going to actually take this one and remove it so it doesn't confuse this. And then that fixes that. So once I close this, I need to remove it off of the combat tracker because I've changed it. And in order to get that to come back up properly, I need to put it back on. So that was the Zephyr. Bring this back up. And when it goes on to the combat tracker, that's when these... So why did it save it there as actions again? Oh, maybe I didn't. I don't know. I thought I just did that. So, So let me do this again. So Control A, Control Copy. Maybe I did it to the other one, but add a trait, and it's going to be called spell casting. And I'm going to copy all of this text here and then hit this. Okay, that's the definition. Now get out of the edit mode, lock the character sheet or the NPC record. I'm going to delete Zephyr from the combat tracker. But why is that deleting it from there? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so NPCs, here's Zephyr. So am I editing the right one? I don't know. Now it's allowing me to change that. How weird. But anyways, that is one of the things you got to look for. So when I was parsing that, I didn't pay attention to that. This should be a trait, not a spell. So let me try this again. One more time. We don't know what's going on, but I'm going to go ahead and add another trait. Oh, you know what? I think it's because I changed it. I think this is different now. I don't think it works the same way. I think they had to change it because of the D&D, one D&D thing. But I'll see what happens. It's supposed to be backwards compatible, so I don't know why it would make a difference, but we'll see. So hit Control A, Control Copy, Control V, and then I'm going to delete it off the spellcasting record. So edit, and then double click that, lock it. Now instead of closing it, I'm just going to drag this to the area over here, and let's see what happens. If it parsed or not. If not, then I have to redo the whole thing. So here's the spellcasting statement. So yeah, it parsed. It fixed it. So now what I was doing is, before I got interrupted there, is I was going to the offense and going to the weapon, and there's a spell. So that's what you want to see, you know, when you're working on. That's why I checked it, because it's broke. So I'll probably have to do the same thing for the rest of them, or for anyone who has spells. So let me check. So this guy only has a couple weapons and a trait, so that's not a big deal. No big deal there. There's the assassin. Let's check his stuff out. Yeah, that looks right. And then here's the one. Nash is probably wrong. So let's take a look. So here we go to the offense. Yeah, see, the spell casting is in the wrong area. So I'm going to delete him off of this. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll close this and that. Bring the spellcaster back up. Change where it's at. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click the new trait and put spellcasting in there as the header. And then for the actual spells, I'm going to hit Control A, Control Copy, Control Victor or V. And then on this bottom one, I'm going to remove this because it's not in the right place in this case. And then this, I'm just going to lock it. And what I'll do is I'll add it to the combat tracker. So I got to make sure I see the right one. Okay, this is Spellcaster 1, Spellcaster 2. So let's see what we got here. So I'm going to open up the effects record for Spellcaster 1. And it kind of looks right. What about Spellcaster 2? Yeah, so it fixed those. So let me delete one of these because I don't need both. Okay, so now let's take a look. So I'm going to pop up the NPC record. It still looks correct. And then I want to get rid of the defense. And I got to add this back on, it looks like. Yep. And then I'll close this one. Where is it? Just 2. So bring that back up. Okay, here we go. Now let's see if that... Yep, it parsed. And I'm going to go to the offense. And there's the spell. So that's what you want to see when you, especially spellcasters or stuff that has a lot of special abilities and stuff, you want that on there. So it looks pretty good. Looks like everything is kosher. Everything looks like it's right. So that's how you check the NPCs when you make them, is make sure that when you hover over the text in the offense field that they all parse, and on the character sheet. So like if you have a weapon or like the throwing dagger, you want to make sure you see that blue text. And then also with the skills and, you know, saves if you have any. So those will kind of turn blue when they parse. So there you go. So that's how you check those. And then this is just a, you know, like preliminary thing that I was checking. To clear this off, you hit the menu, go to delete from tracker, delete only foes. So these are all bad guys. So that clears the entire thing. And then you have now this custom group, custom NPCs. So what I'm going to do is rename this to the Anti-Paladin Crew, because I didn't have a name for it initially. And you want to do this in the beginning. You don't want to be renaming this stuff after you have everything linked together, because that's when you start running into problems. So this is just a way to organize and have it separate from the rest of this content, because I have the bestiary, you know, from the SRD here. So that's the only thing I have loaded. So if I go to the library, under modules. That's all I have loaded. I don't have anything special. And the only reason I had this is so that I can parse it and take a look at things, but it already had some failures. It could not open up compelled duel or protection from good and evil because I didn't have the player's handbook open. But I didn't care as long as it was parsed on the sheet. I don't care. But this tells you that you don't have the right books open. So when you're creating content, you should probably have the book loaded temporarily, at least until you've checked it, and then you can close the book. But in this case, I was just using the SRD. So, and I got kind of burned there because I had a couple spells that Chat GPT added that may not be in the SRD. So you got to kind of watch your content too. And this also could kind of prompt you to think, well, maybe that's not, copyright, or maybe that's not in the new updated SRD and the OGL common Creative Commons license. So anyway, so that's basically the tour of creating an NPC using AI and Chat GPT and Midjourney. So without those tools, I think it would have taken me a day to do all this stuff. I mean, literally, to make the art. If I had the talent to make the art, or if I commissioned the art, it would take months to create this. So I guess that's one good thing about this is I've commissioned artists before, paid a couple $100 for a couple of pieces of art. And I'll tell you what, I got it like 6 months later. And that's just that to me is a long wait, but apparently 1 year is the going standard. So it just depends on the artists and how much work they have and how much time they could put into it. But that is one thing I noticed about purchasing art from a real good reputable source is generally, unless you pay them extra, you're gonna be on a list of commissions. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just letting you know if you're in a hurry, that's not a good wait. But you got to plan this stuff out. So if you're doing a commercial product that's going to be for sale, or you're doing a Kickstarter, you got to have all that art done first, because that takes a long time. So this kind of gives me a quick way to do it for campaigns without having to go through all that pain. But anyways, take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll see you next week, and hopefully you will be joining us for our 6th annual Founders Day weekend 6, which is coming up. We've already released the game, so if you want to play in a game, regardless of the rule set, there's different rule sets, but if you want to play any of those games, they're available on Warhorn. That information will be on the links afterwards. And all the tools that I use today, the links for them and some of the information that I've got here is linked in that description for the video. So if you're watching this in the future, you want to know what tools I was using and such, that should all be in the